In the last section, we discussed how lust changed man's and woman's intentionality from being a being for another to being a substrate of somebody else's appropriation, from a giver to a taker, from a lover to a user. Christ knew that, and he took man back to what happened during Old Testament times in order to improve upon it and bring about the redemption of the body he had come to effect in his own body. What had happened in the Old Testament is there were the various compromises done, not just in terms of divorce. Pope John Paul II describes the capitulations that were made in terms of polygamy, that even with David and Solomon, so that there could be at least this commitment in marriage, but because of the lust of the flesh that would go to lusting after others who were not even wives, God permitted, though he didn't want, this polygamy to exist so that Solomon could have dozens of wives and David could have certainly more than one as well. That was not what Christ had said man was originally made for. So in the Old Testament times, there were various compromises. But in the Old Testament as well, the prophets especially saw what was happening to man, the subject of this lust, and how it was leading him to desire these compromises against what God's original plan had been. When you look to the book of Proverbs, just a short little chapter, do not desire her beauty in your heart, we read in Proverbs 6:25. That passage understood human psychology very well, that we can lust after women's beauties in our hearts to try to appropriate it, and that's the source of falling away from the nuptial, committed meaning of the body that God had given us in the beginning. In the book of Sirach, we see something beyond it. And the author, inspired by the Holy Spirit, says, two kinds of individuals multiply sins, and a third incurs wrath. Hot passion that blazes like a fire will not be quenched until it burns itself out. And whoever commits fornication will never cease until the fire burns on up. It compares lust to this unquenchable fire. Jesus wants to come as the divine fireman to put out that fire so that that person can burn with another flame. Literally the flame of love for God, the flame, the burning pure flame of true love, like the burning bush by which God spoke to Moses before he had sent him to Egypt. God was preparing his people by his teaching on adultery in relationship to their communion with him, their covenant with him, to understand what Christ was going to say about the covenant and the adultery between man and woman. Christ was coming specifically to say about the monogamy that needs to exist, that man and woman are supposed to be united to themselves and only to themselves until death. And God showed that through what he had said through the prophets in the Old Testament. Every sin of infidelity of the people of Israel against God, God compared in the prophet Isaiah, in Hosea, in Ezekiel, and in Jeremiah to adultery committed against God, because Israel was supposed to have a monogamous relationship with the one true God, just like man and woman were supposed to have a relationship uniquely with each other. That brings us up to what Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount, that anyone who looks on a woman with lust has already committed adultery in his heart. Lust is this adultery in the heart, and Christ came to save man from those falsely passionate, falsely burning desires which will never be quenched. How does that come about? Christ calls man to purity of heart. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. We're going to talk about in our next lesson how Pope John Paul II makes that more explicit with the help of what St. Paul wrote. But Christ's whole mission in that statement was to rediscover man's true ethical values. What he had noticed was that lust and love were warring together in man's heart, and that woman had become for man an object of sexual values rather than a person. The only worthy response to whom would be love, would be that gift of self. And in order for man to become that lover again, he had to master that lust. Christ had come to create a new ethos. Over the course of the Christian centuries, though, that ethos was misinterpreted. Christ's statement about adultery in the heart was taken out of context and used against what Pope John Paul II says was the original meaning of this loving communion of persons expressed through the body that God had created in the beginning. He singles out two particular candidates for this false understanding. The first he called Manichaeanism. This was a heresy in the early church that said that everything material was bad, everything spiritual was good. Since love was expressed through the body, and the body itself was material, therefore bad, love would be bad. Carnal love, making love. It was only to carry out the duty of procreation. There was supposed to be no real love expressed there because the body was considered bad. Pope John Paul II says, in contrast, what Christ was attacking was not the body. He was attacking lust in the heart, and lust in the heart that sometimes expresses itself in the body. So he said the Manichaean solution was false. The second false solution is a more modern solution, which flows out of a false understanding of this threefold lust St. John describes in his first letter: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And he ascribes this to somebody that Paul Ricoeur, a great philosopher of modern times, said were the masters of suspicion. These masters of suspicion were those who completely distrusted the human heart, that said that the human heart could never will what was truly good. And he named the three of them. He said Freud was the one who said that the human heart would always respond under the lust of the flesh. There was nothing that could be done about it. He said that Marx was the one who founded Marxism, that said everything was reducible to the lust of the eyes, to this type of possessiveness for things, for the economic man. And the third was Friedrich Nietzsche, the nihilist German philosopher, who said everything was a will to power based on this pride of life, this desire to dominate others, and that nothing could be done about this. Pope John Paul II says that each was wrong. Each was based on a little bit of truth deriving from this threefold lust, but their conclusions on the basis of it were off, because man's heart can be healed. That those threefold lusts isn't the final thing to be said about man. Christ came to bring us back to the beginning and forward to the end. How is that going to happen? The first thing that the Pope says needs to be done is we need to rehabilitate the word eros. Originally, in Platonic philosophy, eros was a desire that was driving us toward the good, the true, and the beautiful. It was meant to bring us to the things that really matter, the things that really last. But what happened after the sin, especially through the history of this false appropriation of what Christ was saying in the gospel and the false appropriation of man's experience of lust in his heart, was that eros became something by which men were desiring others for their own sexual gratification. That's what we see in a lot of pornography today. That type of eros needs to be rehabilitated. Just like Pope John Paul II said as a young priest in love and responsibility, he needs to introduce Christ's type of love into the human experience of love. Christ's agape, the self-giving love, as the Greek word says, into the human experience of eros. To rehabilitate eros and put a real ethos, a real ethic, a morality back into ethos so that it will truly be loving and help man. In conclusion, on the basis of all that Christ has said about lust in the human heart, where do we go from here? Christ says that man is the subject to this new ethos of the redemption of the body. By Christ himself taking the body into the Godhead during the incarnation, Christ has redeemed the human body, and we need to enter into that redemption of Christ so that we can share his fruits. That is truly the ethos of the new redemption. By entering into Christ's union with his body, who says always, "This is my body given for you," we rediscover how we're called to love and give of ourselves in loving communion to each other and back to God. That involves self-mastery, that involves temperance, but it also involves love. Pope John Paul II legitimately says that this might be experienced as a certain emptiness at first, but then it leads to a tremendous flourishing of human love. In our next talk, we'll discuss where the Holy Father goes from here, how purity of heart is essential, and how it can truly set man free.